Okay, well, it's been quite a long time. Over a year ago, John Footsell and I, decided to try and do a series talking to former Rhodesian and Zimbabwean sportsmen, and I was lucky enough to talk to Nick Price and to Brian Murphy
Are you gone
of
dead
rugby
there
fame. Um, and then
after a year ago?
I've had a busy time doing other things, so we're just trying to pick up the pieces,
Yeah.
and I'm very happy to say I've managed to get in touch with John Traicos in Australia, in Perth, um, who's really, truly a cricket legend in the context of Rhodesian Zimbabwean cricket, but not only on the field, off the field, one of the great gentlemen of the game. And John's just got a hell of a story to tell, some of which I know about because I lived some of it as a youngster, watching a lot of the games that John played in. But what's been a big help, and John, let me just bring you in at this point. Thank you very much for making the time to talk to me.
No, pleasure.
John, this has been my reference
Right.
book. I treasure this book. Oh, John T.
Yeah.
Winch, I'm Tali boy. He was
Yeah.
senior to me.
I've got
But
it at home.
what a great service he did us, all us people who
Yeah. That's
just
right.
want to know about what happened in the old days. So I've been rummaging through there just to refresh my memory.
Right.
Unfortunately, old John T only takes us up to 82. So
Right.
after 82, I'm a little bit hazy. I do remember
Right.
some of the events. But John, over to you. Just with all the Greek people I know, and our Rich Passaportis I spoke to the other day, he's got a fascinating story. The story of how your family ended up in what was then Southern Rhodesia. That let's just start with that.
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, the Traicos family, my uncle Dimitri Traicos came to Rhodesia, southern Rhodesia, back in the late 1920s, and settled in and around what was Fort Victoria, Masvingo today.
Yes.
And he got into business there and mainly ended up in, I think he worked a butchery to start with, and then he had African trading stores. Now, my dad, Trifon Traicos, was one of five brothers who were born in Lemnos in Greece. My father, at the age of 12, because there was no work on the islands, went to Egypt because there was a relative there who had a property there. And my dad worked in Egypt and lived in Egypt uh, until we moved to southern Rhodesia in 1948. So that's my dad's background. Basically, he was a mechanic, very skilled in fixing motor vehicles. Worked in the Allied garages during the war in Egypt. Um, and my mum was born in Egypt. Her mother had come from another Greek island called Kalimnos, which is famous for sponges, fishing sponges. And my grandmother had come to Egypt. She had married. My mum was born in Egypt. My mum and dad married in, it must have been about 1943, I think it was, 42, 43. Um, and then after the war, Egypt was getting a little bit uncertain. I think NASA was agitating. I think there was quite a lot of political upheaval, and they decided to move to Rhodesia. My uncle Dimitri uh, got them into southern Rhodesia. So my brother and I, both of whom were born in Egypt, went with my mum and dad to southern Rhodesia. So that was in 1948, and we grew up in Fort Vic. Went to local schools there, Fort Vic Junior School, then Fort Vic High School when it was built. And the Traicos family was involved in business there. My dad worked for my uncle in the local trading store business. And so we grew up in Fort Vic, very small town, one horse town, you might call it, but it had its attractions. Um, and so we sort of were lucky. We had a good high school, which was I think built in about 1958 or 59. Very good staff there. Neil Jardine, you remember, who was a famous
Yes.
rugby player. He was one of the early teachers there, taught history and English. And those were the sort of the heroes we had at that age, were those sort of guys. Where um, my cousin Peter Tricos, who passed away recently, in Durban, was a very good sportsman himself. He played for 6 or 7 different sports for the Midlands province. Was picked to play hockey for Rhodesia, and was also a good rugby player. He played in a couple of Rhodesian invitation 11s. So we sort of grew up in that sporting background when we started playing cricket in the front yard of our home, and Peter was our hero. He used to bat the whole holidays, and we bowled and fielded for most of the time. Um, so we had that sporting background. Probably Fort Vic, very little to do other than the cinemas to go to. But sport became very much part of our life. And my brother and I, we grew up. We loved cricket. We were passionate about cricket. We played cricket the whole time, every single day of the holidays. We had our teams. Do you want me to carry on, or do you want me to stop? Or
Yes. No, carry on.
okay.
Lovely.
And so we were quite passionate and about the game. My brother was a big fan of Australia. His heroes were Richie Benaud, Neil Harvey, very much that team that came, Ian Craig, the team that came to South Africa in 1958, 57, 58, I think it was. And my heroes were the South Africans, Jackie McGlew, Trevor Goddard, Johnny Waite, Roy McLean, Hugh Tayfield, all of those. And we used to have very, very testing cricket matches in the front garden, which was not a lawn at all. It was just bare dust. Um, and we played test matches against each other. He was always Australia. I was always South Africa. We had our own rules that if Australia was bowling, he had to bowl left-handed because Alan Davidson was a left-hander. Ian Mac was a left-hander. And then when they brought his spinners on, he had to bowl leg breaks like Richie Benaud. And similarly, I had to bowl like Neil Adcock, Peter Heine, Hugh Tayfield. When we batted, I had to bat like Trevor Goddard as a left-hander. So we acquired skills where you became ambidextrous very quickly. And we could both bowl. And the best I enjoyed is when you had to bowl left hand like Lindsay Klein out of the back of the hand. It was all exciting stuff. The road wasn't far away. So our house was right on the road, the main road leading into Fort Vic. And so it was about a 50-yard boundary, maybe less, 35, 40. And so we used to get our friends fielding. And so that's how we really grew up and got passionate about cricket. We played soccer in the soccer season and rugby in obviously the rugby season. So that was our background. It's a small hometown and always dreaming about cricket. Cricket was our passion.
John, and then I see, thanks to Jonty's book, uh, played Nuffield you were picked for the Nuffield team in '66, which was basically the Rhodesian schools team, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. There was I played Nuffield. That's right. It was Nuffield '66, January '66, and that was in Cape
With
Town.
with Richie Kashula and Stuart Robertson are two of the names
Yeah,
that
Richie, he was there. Stuart, also people like Jimmy Mitchell. The captain of that team was Colin Fletcher, Duncan Fletcher's elder brother. And they had people like Roy McLaughlin. I don't remember him. He was a fast bowler from Matabeleland. And it was a good side, very, very good side. Rob Berry was the wicketkeeper. Rob was St George's very talented all-round sportsman. And he was the only one out of the Rhodesian team that made the South African schools that year. He was a wicketkeeper batsman.
yes,
And
I
so
know
he
Rob Berry. He's in Cape Town, brother of Dave, the
that's
late
right.
Dave Berry.
Yeah, I saw Rob some years ago when we were in the Cape. It must be about 5, 6 years ago. I saw him at what's that golf course? That very nice golf course on the wine estate.
Steenberg. Yeah, I
Yeah,
played there with him a little while ago. I had a game with him and I think Mike Rich
yeah,
at Steenberg, funny enough.
yeah.
So yeah,
He was yeah, very talented. I mean, he went on. He got a scholarship to Stellenbosch as a rugby player, part of Donny Craven's scholarships. And I asked him what happened, and he said, "Oh, he lost interest." But anyway, huge achievement, very talented guy. So it was really, really good team, very, very good team. So
John,
that was
your first when were you picked first time for? So you played provincial cricket for who? Midlands or?
I played. It was sort of like a series of things happened from that Nuffield week in '66. Um, I had a. I got to a spinners course, and they picked me for a spinners course that South Africa cricket was running in 1966. Um, I then um, I then got picked to go to. I got picked for South African universities in 1967, they had a tour of England, and then they were really, really good cricketers. People like Dusty Biggs, Arthur Short, Pelham Henwood, some really, really good cricketers. And then soon after that, I got picked for Rhodesia, It would have been in the latter part of 1968, at the end of the season, probably January, February. There was a playing for Midlands against Matabeleland in Fort Victoria, my hometown. And after that match, I was picked to play for Rhodesia, where Colin Bland was the captain. And I played 2 games for Rhodesia at the end of that season. Um,
And
so
John,
that was
was Goofy Lawrence still around then?
No, he wasn't. No, Goofy wasn't. Joe Partridge was just finishing off. Joe was we played. In fact, I played against Joe in that match between Midlands and Matabeleland just before I got picked. He was right at the end of his career, but he was captaining Matabeleland. But Goofy, I'm not sure. Goofy had gone to Australia, I think, fairly young, fairly early. Goofy played against New Zealand
Okay.
in 1962, I think it was, and he only played four tests, and those were the only tests he played. But what he says, he should have played more, which is probably right. Um,
No, because I was just going through, and I picked up he was the leading wicket taker for Rhodesia.
yeah,
296 wickets, followed
that's
by
right. Yeah, yeah,
by Joe Partridge,
yeah.
281, and then Jackie Dupree, 277,
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
Richie Kashula.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were great players. I mean, Joe and Goofy were outstanding. They should have both played more tests for South Africa, and particularly in 1960 when they went to England and they lost that series there and picked neither of them in that touring side.
John, just tell us a bit about Joe Partridge. So many stories about him. What was it about him that he moved the ball through the air and off the
He
pitch?
swung the ball. Joe's biggest thing was the late inducker. He's not a very athletic looking guy. He ran up and he bowled and he was actually a lot quicker than what he looked like. But he had the ability to swing the ball very late, big induckers. But then he also developed a leg cutter, which was when he came to Australia in 63, 64, he was very, very unplayable on some of the wickets there, and particularly in Sydney. I think he picked up 7 in a test match there, bowled absolutely beautifully. But he played test cricket too late. He should have played, that was 63, 64, they went to Australia, but Joe should have played in 60. They picked an England side where I think they picked a guy called Jim Pothecary from Western Province, who was a good bowler, but not in Joe's class, with the greatest respect. Joe was right up there, and so was Goofy.
And John, Richie Kashula, there's a story that Barry Richards said that Richie Kashula was one of the hardest spinners to read. He never quite knew what was going to come out of his hand.
Yeah, Richie, good bowling action. Despite his physical side of things, he was always a bit heavy. He was incredibly accurate and subtle changes of pace, but basically drifted the ball in. So he was always coming in at you a little bit, and then he would straighten. But very, very accurate. That was his great skill. He was incredibly accurate.
And tell us a bit about Colin Bland. We all know he was
Colin,
really.
I played under Colin in my first season for Rhodesia, and he was really good to me. I was just got into the team, introduced me to everybody, told me about all the guys. And At that stage, I was living in the Lowveld. We had moved from Fort Vic to the Lowveld, and I used to travel up to Harare for matches. And Colin always looked after me, but he was really, really good when starting off. Um, you know, he uh, he was basically a loner, Colin. He had his he was a sort of guy at weekends on a cricket tour where you played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was off, and you played again Monday. You wouldn't see Colin after Saturday night, after Saturday's play. You wouldn't see Colin at all. He was very much a loner, but incredibly disciplined and really fit. And even when I played, he had done his knee because I played in 67, sorry, 68, and he had damaged his knee against the Australians in that 66, 67 series, the first test. So he damaged his knee, and he was always struggling a little bit with his knee, but he was still a really good player, good fielder. Um, he helped me a lot. One of the games I was playing in Bulawayo against Eastern Province, and it was against Graham Pollock and Laurie Wilmot. They had a really good side, and I bowled the first over, and he came to me and he said, "Just bowl it a little bit slower," he said. And I did that, and then the ball started turning, and I picked up 6 wickets that day. really, he was really good. He was really loyal to his team. He was good. He was an individual, and his fielding records. You would have seen that and heard about that. But I mean, you talk to the guys who were at in Bulawayo, were at Milton School with him. His dad taught him fielding in front of a hockey net with one stump, and he'd roll the ball out to Colin, who was 30 meters away, and Colin used to sprint from either right or left, pick it up one-handed, one movement, hit the stumps. He was quite incredible. He was a legend. You probably will follow it, but in 1965, when the Springboks were in England, playing against Kent, and the game was washed out, and Colin Cowdrey, who was captain of Kent, wanted to entertain the crowd, so he asked Colin Bland to give a fielding exhibition. And Colin Bland did that. He put one stump up, 30 meters out, they rolled the ball out at him, and he knocked the one stump over 8 times out of 10. They're legendary stuff. I mean, he in that 65 series stuff that I followed, he ran Jim Parks out between his legs. Colin was at backward square, and Jim Parks hit it into mid wicket and thought an easy single. And Colin ran from backward square, one-handed pickup, and hit the stumps at the bowler's end, but the ball went straight through Jim Parks's legs, knocked the stumps over. So, that's the sort of guy he was. Jonty was a great fielder as well, but, I don't think anybody had the grace and speed and pickup that Colin had, all in one movement. So he revolutionized fielding. I think that had a great impact on cricket in Rhodesia and in Zimbabwe, because there was always a high emphasis on fielding. So Colin was great.
John, they say that if Colin Bland had decided to play rugby, he probably would have played. He would have played Springbok rugby. He was just such a brilliant all-rounder.
I remember Alvin Botanic talking about that. I think he was at university in Rhodes, and I think he played for Central Universities as a fullback or as a wing. And they said he was incredibly talented, and he could have easily done that. And just like a lot of other cricketers, like Peter Carlstein, for example, was another guy who could have played provincial. And Peter did play provincial rugby for Western Transvaal as a centre, I think, or a fly half. Colin was one of those guys, naturally talented, incredibly fit, good guy.
John, let's just move forward. Come 69, 70,
Yeah.
you picked for the Springboks. Just tell us, how did you get the news? I mean, it must have been incredibly
Well,
exciting.
it was strange. What had happened is we'd had a very short cricket season, that 1969 season. In fact, the Currie Cup was only up until Christmas time, basically. So we played 4 matches in that season, and then the Australians were coming, and so they were going to be there for the rest of the season. That's the rest of 69 and the first couple of months of 1970. And so there had been talk about, who's going to be the spinners, and there were a lot of talk. And I didn't really think at all that there was any prospect of me getting picked. I'd had a good season the season before. That truncated season, I'd only picked up about 7 or 8 wickets. I didn't think that, I'd be there. It wasn't in my mind at all. But I was living in the Lowveld. A good friend of mine, David Pastorius, and I used to play cricket there. And he said he was going to watch the second test in Durban in 1970. And he said, well, why don't we go together? Because I had to go back to university. So I drove down with him and his dad, and we went to Durban, and we were on the beachfront, and we were sort of enjoying it, and we were talking about how we'd go and watch the test match on a rickshaw, and we were having fun. And the next morning I was shaving, and he rushed in with a Natal Mercury, and he said, "You've been picked for South Africa." That's how I found out. Um, and anyway, so it was a complete shock, but obviously it was a tremendous honor.
So, John, just talk us a bit through that series. That year, I gather the Australians declined to travel to Rhodesia for political reasons, so that wasn't on their
Yeah,
itinerary.
they didn't have a game there. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So just talk us through those. You played 3 tests.
Yeah,
It was Bill Laurie was the Australian captain.
right.
I know Garth McKenzie was one of the opening bowlers, but
Yep.
just tell us about some of
Yeah.
some of the players. It was when Barry Richards played. Just talk us
Yeah,
through
I mean, yeah, the Australian team was a fairly strong team. Bill Lawry was captain. They had a pretty good team. Ian Redpath, Ian Chappell. They had
Keith
Had,
Stackpole.
yeah, Keith Stackpole. So Stackpole and Laurie opened. There was Paul Sheehan. So they had quite a strong batting lineup. They had bowling wise Graham McKenzie, Laurie Main. There's one other,
Gleeson.
Alan. Yeah, and the big guy there was Gleeson. It was Gleeson and Mallet were the two spinners. Gleeson was the finger spinner who spun the ball out the front of his fingers like that. And he didn't know whether it was going to be an off break or a leg break. And there were many funny things about that as the Springboks tried to work out how to play Gleeson. In fact, that was one of the first things when playing the Test match in Durban. They'd just beaten Australia in Newlands in the first Test, and everybody couldn't read Gleeson. They were talking about it. And Eddie Barlow said, this is a bit of a joke. Eddie Barlow said, I worked it out. And they said, well, Eddie, tell us. And he said, no, I'll tell you after the next match, which was the third Test in Joburg. And so Eddie went out to bat. Eddie was batting number 5 at that stage because Trevor Goddard was opening with Barry Richards. And Eddie Gleeson was on. And second ball, he jumped down the track to Gleeson and smacked him through mid-wicket, the beautiful on drive. And then turned around to the guys in the pavilion at the Wanderers and sort of gave it the thumbs up. Anyway, 3 balls later, he was stumped, trying to hit an off break through mid-wicket, and Gleeson had got it. Now, the funny thing about that was that Eddie wouldn't tell us, but Barry Richards had actually worked it out. Barry read the hand very, very well. And what he actually said is when Gleeson is bowling the off break, which was the surprise ball because he was primarily leg break, but it's the off break when you see the thumb. The moment you see the thumb there, it's the off break. And so, Barry had a great season. Durban, that first test I played in, he and Graham Pollock put on a huge partnership. It was a sort of hour. Barry had got 90 by lunch. He was on 93 at lunch. And then Graham came in because Ali got out just on lunch or just after lunch. And Graham Pollock came in. And in that hour after lunch, they pummeled the Australian attack. They were smashing it to all parts of the ground. They were all boundaries, really hard hit, straight drives, totally dominated. And Barry got 140. Graham went on to get 274, which was the highest score by a South African cricket at that stage, broke Jackie McGlew's record. It was a great day of cricket, and it was a very strong team. I was lucky to be there. I was fortunate enough to be, I guess, looked after as a bowler. I was lucky enough to pick up 4 catches in that test in the first innings.
Tell us about those catches, John. You were fielding forward short leg. They were close in.
Well, I took one pretty standard one in the gully. It was Doug Walters was batting, and Eddie Barlow. Eddie always bustling, always there getting things done. And he came across just before that over bowled, and he just said to us in the slips. There was Barry and myself and Lee Irvin were in the slips. I was in gully, and he just said, "Now just watch it because this guy will nick it into slips." And sure enough, third or fourth ball he nicked it, and I caught him. Sort of going to the left, it was reasonably straightforward catch. It was nothing spectacular. I then had 2 the next day. I had 2, which I thought were the hardest catches of all. One was Graham McKenzie, and the other one was other all-rounder who was playing for Australia at that stage, Alan. Anyway, they tried to hook Procky and Peter Pollock, and they got top edges, and it flew really high in the air. Really high. And I was in the gully and I was actually basically terrified. Jesus, I don't want to have to take that. And I looked around to the wicketkeeper, who was Dennis Gamsey, and he wasn't going to take it either. So I had to go and catch it. And I caught both those very low down. I didn't catch them up under your chin. I caught them very low down. So those were, I guess, standard catches, but I found quite hard. And then I was very lucky in the after lunch session on what was the third day. Paul Sheehan hit a half volley from Trevor Goddard. I was at bat pad, about a couple of meters away from the bat, and he hit this ball in the middle of the bat and straight at my right shin. And my hands just happened to be there, and it hit my hand and it stuck. And it's just one of those, you just drive in there. So I was really lucky. I was in sort of 4 catches. There was a bit of a record at that stage for a guy playing in his first test. Picked up a couple of wickets. So I enjoyed it. It was really good, and it was in front of my home crowd because I was at university in Durban, and there were a lot of my university mates there in Castle Corner, cheering and shouting. I enjoyed the innings. I came in to bat after Graham Pollock had got his 274, and the score was 580 for 9. And Ali Bacher wanted to break the South African record, which was 620. And so he said, you guys bat through. So I joined Peter Pollock, the wicket. We put on 42 for the last wicket. We got to 622, and Bacher declared. And it was interesting playing Gleeson. Yeah, I never picked the ball. I think I took everyone on the pad. But it was exciting stuff. For a young guy, it was, for me, really, really exciting.
John, before that series, all the talk was about Ian Chappell, but he didn't really feature, did he? He didn't. He didn't
He
really.
struggled a bit, Ian. Yeah, the one thing I think they'd had quite a tough tour of India. So when they came to South Africa, following that, they were a little bit jaded, and not so much. Ian struggled a bit. Graham McKenzie was the one who really struggled because he'd been sick in India, and he came to South Africa. He was a little below par. And the South Africans feared Graham more than anybody else because he had bowled them out in 66, 67. And I remember Ali Bacher telling us in team talks, he just said to Barry and to Lee and to Crocky and the guys, he said, look, if you're going to get out, don't give your wicket to McKenzie, because if he gets the smell, he's going to be unplayable. So, that was how much they rated Graham, really rated him very highly. Ian Chappell, nice. They were all very good guys. They were really, really good. They played the game hard. They were hard and fair. Ian Chappell struggled. The one time he got going was in the test in Joburg, in the third test. And I remember they were 12 for 3, and Chappell and Redpath got together. They put on 100. And Chappell, I don't know what he ended up getting, but there was this controversial catch with Tiger Lance where the story behind it, I hope I'm not boring you with all this stuff, but Eddie Barlow was always one for changing the ball, because he believed you change the ball, you got a harder ball, more bounce, and I'm pretty sure he kept picking the seam. But anyway, he kept saying to the umpires, got to change the ball, got to change the ball, look at this, really look at this shape. And he was fiddling around with the seam, and then eventually he broke the seam, and he said to the umpires, held the ball up like that, hanging by the thread, and he said, now come on, now will you change it? So they changed it. Trevor Goddard came on to bowl at Ian Chappell, and Ian drove at one which went across him, and Tiger was at backward point, and Tiger dived forward and scooped the catch, and nobody knew whether it carried or hadn't carried. It was one of those which sort of going down the slope sort of thing, and the umpires didn't know. The umpires looked around. Trevor Goddard was the only guy who appealed. And I can't remember the two umpires. One was Carl Coetzee. Anyway, I don't think he was standing. He was at the bowler's end. But anyway, they didn't make a decision. They were dithering around. And Chappell eventually turned around to Tiger, who had been a big mate of his, and said, Tiger, did you catch it? And Tiger was standing there with the ball in his hands and nodded his head. Anyway, Chappell walked. And Tiger cracked the joke afterwards. Well, he didn't ask me whether it bounced first. Okay. So anyway, that was, and I'm not sure. I thought Tiger caught it. That was my view. But anyway, so there's a lot of that sort of stuff. And then, we won. I think the South African team was pretty strong. Lee Irvin had a great season. Barry got that 140 in Durban. Then he got 126 in Port Elizabeth in the last test. And Barry was a perfectionist. He scored 126 in Port Elizabeth in the first innings. And then sitting around, he said to me, come and throw me some balls. I'm not hitting my on drive well. Okay, so that was Barry, perfectionist. But there was a good side. Procky, of course, he was a key part of the bowling attack. He bowled magnificently that whole series. The last test in Port Elizabeth, when Peter Pollock was off the field, the bowling was a little bit thin, and Procky was struggling with flu. And he bowled magnificently. He picked up 6 for 70 at the end of the day. And then apparently he was in bed for 3 days after that. But he was magnificent. He made runs, took wickets. Excellent.
John, just talk a bit about Barry Richards, the genius of Barry Richards. It's always something that's fascinated me about these great batsmen. But they say he just could see the ball earlier. He knew what he.
Yeah, I think look. I mean, he was smart. Barry was a really smart cricketer. He obviously could play the quicks very well. I was at a cocktail party on Friday night, and Chris Smith and Robin Smith were there, and they talked about Barry because they spent a lot of time in Natal with Barry, and they reckon that when the West Indies came on those rebel tours to South Africa in the 1980s, Barry would go down to the nets and he was worried about the quicks. And they sort of get the bowling machine, they turn it up to 100 miles an hour. And Kippy Smith just said, Barry was unreal. There were guys leaving balls, but Barry was on the back foot, hitting them through the covers. That sort of thing. So he had a great eye. He could read. He was smart, and I told you the story about Gleason. He'd worked that out. Very confident, and a very good technique. He had a very good technique. He was absolutely particular about his technique, getting it right, making sure he's hitting everything straight. And then there's a story here in Perth, which I only discovered when I came here, and that was where he had scored 300 in one day, batting for South Australia against Western Australia. A Western Australian attack included Graham McKenzie and Dennis Lilly. Okay, and he made 300 in a day. And I was talking to Graham McKenzie about it the other day because Graham McKenzie lives down the road from me in Perth, and we play the odd game of golf together. And he was just saying, he just couldn't believe it. He said, got to the last ball of the day, and Lilly was bowling, and Richards just walked down the wicket and smacked it over long off and put the bat under his arms. And he ended up getting 320 or something the next day. So he was a legend. He and Graham Pollock, obviously, outstanding.
And Graham Pollock also, John, he always looked like he had time to play his shots.
Yeah, I mean, Barry talks about, Graham wasn't technically perfect. Barry was technically absolutely perfect. Graham played a lot by instinct, but I remember Barry saying, well, you get a guy like that who's a genius, you just let him play. You don't change anything. It's a bit like Procky's bowling action. And the bowling first, they said, well, hang on, he shouldn't be bowling with the wrong foot there. And I remember Neil Adcock saying, just let him bowl. He's natural, he's quick. So it's that sort of thing. And Graham was like that. Graham was outstanding.
John, let's go talking about Proctor, the Proctor era, and he really brought cricket alive in Rhodesia when he moved up.
There's no doubt about that. I wrote a piece about Procky after he passed away, a piece in the Gloucester local thing that they had in memory of him. But there's absolutely no doubt that he changed the face of cricket in Zimbabwe. Prior to him coming there in 1970, because he joined in 1970 after that 70 series against Australia, and then they were in the B section. They won the B section. They went up to the A section. Procky brought in the training methods in Zimbabwe, which we used. Well, there was Rhodesia then still, but which we used going right through the 1980s. And they were, after every practice, you did at least 45 minutes to an hour's physical. Okay, and that physical consisted of heavy fielding routines, throwing at stumps, slip catching off the edge of the bat, and sprint work. And Procky was big on that, and he changed the face of Zimbabwe cricket. Guys were holding their catches, guys were a lot fitter, and that lesson, although it's sort of like that sort of training regime might have slowed down in the 70s for a while, when Duncan Fletcher took over as captain in 79 and 80, and I was his vice captain, we reintroduced that, where there was, and because Zimbabwe was trying to get test status at that time, we got those fielding drills in, all the catching, all the hard physical work. And that's why Rhodesian and Zimbabwe sides, I guess, playing on the Colin Bland influence, were really good in the field. They held their catches, they got run-outs. You only got to go through the games we played to see how all that. But Procky was instrumental in that. He was instrumental in changing the face of cricket. He performed magnificently with the ball and the bat in those early years in the 70s. And of course, they had that magic moment. I wasn't playing at that stage. I was trying to get back into the side when they should have won the Curry Cup, because they beat Eastern Province in Bulawayo in the famous walk-off game, where Laurie Wilmot walked his team off, saying,
John, just let me stop you there. Just tell us what happened there, what that controversy was all about.
What actually happened in those days, they usually took drinks with 1 hour to go, and in the last hour, you had to bowl 20 overs. Okay, so they got to the drink session, Procky was batting with Paddy Clift. Procky and they were they had to get 6 and over to win, something like that, 5 or 6 and over, and they were actually going great guns. And Procky said to the umpires, 20 overs, and they said, yeah, 20 overs to go. And there was a mix-up with Laurie Wilmot, because Laurie Wilmot thought that there was only 19. I don't know how he got to that. So what happened is when they got to last over to be bowled, there were 6 runs required. Laurie Wilmot walked off the field with his team, took his team off the field. The umpires, one of whom was a Zimbabwean umpire from Bulawayo, I think, they awarded the game to Rhodesia. They said, you walked off game Rhodesia. So Eastern Province, backed up by obviously certain other provinces in South Africa, took the matter on appeal to the South African Cricket Board. And the South African Cricket Board ruled in their favour and took the 10 points away for that win, because you got 10 points for an outright win. If we'd kept those 10 points, Rhodesia would have won the Curry Cup. And Procky, I remember chatting to Procky about it before he passed away. Procky came to Perth and promoted his book some years ago, and he just remembers that so vividly and sees it as a major blemish in South African cricket. They had talk of taking that to court, but they never did that. That was the famous walk-off in Bulawayo.
Okay, John, Brian Davidson was also quite a big player in that team. A very strong, hard-hitting batsman, and could bowl some medium pace.
Yeah, Davo was. I saw Davo a few months ago. You know, he lives in Tasmania, and he was travelling through Perth, and we caught up, and we had a breakfast together. I think a breakfast, and then he went to Zimbabwe. I think he went back to Zim for a while, came back, and we had lunch. And he's fit. He's very fit. Lives in Tasmania. He's as strong as he ever was. He was undoubtedly one of the hardest hitters of the ball you could come across. I think in this 2020 scenario, he would have been unreal. He was a good shot of the ball. He developed from when I first played, Davo would be batting at number 7 or 8, bowling a little bit of seam. This was under Colin Bland. And then he went overseas, played for Leicestershire, and became their number 1 batter, batting number 4, and learnt a lot from Ray Illingworth, but became a really good cricketer. And you know, he sort of got into winning matches, and he did it for Rhodesia several times, where he'd come in, win a match, get 100, but always a bit like Colin Bland, attacking. You know, he went for it. Colin was an attacking player. He was a sort of a cavalier. And Davo was a bit like that. Davo was never going to stick around and play, you know, what do they call it, arse and elbow, but he was going to smack it around. So a good player, and also surprisingly a good captain. You know, I never thought that Davo would captain, but when he took it on after Procky hurt his knee in the early 70s, 73, I think it was, 74, he did a really good job, really good job. And it was just sort of common sense and was very good with the players. You know, not perfect as a leader, but led by example.
John, I think time's a bit of a problem for you, so there's so much more I want to talk to you about. But Paddy Clift, he was also a great all-round cricketer and a joy to watch.
Yeah, Paddy great. Paddy was obviously, I mean, sadly he passed away so early. You know, he was an all-rounder in the top category. You know, he was picked, I think, for a South African 11 in the early 70s. So it might have been the late 70s. And he could bat, could bowl, he could field. He bowled reasonably good off spin when required. But his big thing was he always hit the seam, and he was pretty tall and strong, and got a nice bit of bounce. But a good all-rounder, good fielder, really good player, very good player.
John, another guy that that you played against, I think, was Gary Sobers, the great West Indian all-rounder. Just tell us a bit about him.
I can't say much about that. He came and played in a one-day competition in Zimbabwe, in Rhodesia, in 1970. And that was, I wasn't there. I was at university at that time. Okay. But he played in a one-day competition with, I think, Ali Baha, Procky, and that was like a big promotional thing. So I don't know much about Gary. You know, he was obviously one of our heroes and followed him with, you know, closely when we could.
But Mike Proctor was up there with him as an all-rounder, would you say? I mean, because Mike
Well,
Proctor
well,
could also bowl spin.
that's right, and you know in the UK they have the, I think it was an award for the All Rounder of the Year, and there's a picture I think Procky showed me with Sobers handing the trophy to Procky. But you're right. I mean, Procky could do anything. I mean, he could naturally bowl off spin. Remember, he bowled Transvaal out in Bulawayo, where he picked up 9 wickets in an innings to win the match, 8 of which were bowling off spin. Um, and you know, he could bat. You know, so he was in that category. Very, very special cricketers. Very talented. You know.
John, the batsman that really you didn't enjoy bowling to, who were those guys that you
Guys,
struggled with?
I didn't enjoy bowling to.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, they were all difficult. I mean, and I think most batsmen, the top batters were difficult. I mean, Barry Richards was hard to bowl to. You know, when Barry was a mood player, when he wanted to play, you know, nobody could bowl to him. You know, so he was our Graham Pollock, pretty much the same. You know, unless you got on a real turner, you know, Graham was going to smack you through the covers, hit you over the top. Brian Davison was obviously one of the hardest ones I could bowl at. I mean, he was very powerful. So you go through all those. I mean, there were some really, really good players. So it was nice to play against them. I bowled against Brian Lara when he came starting off his career. He came to Zimbabwe in about 19, would have been about 1989, I think, 1990. And he was a outstanding player. You know, great hands, everything. And then we played against a lot of the Australians: Dean Jones, Steve Waugh, Mark Taylor, uh, Martin Crowe, New Zealand. So a lot of guys I was fortunate enough to play against. And they're really good cricketers and challenging stuff. And sometimes you got away with it, other times you didn't. You know,
John,
Capel
a
Dev.
guy that we haven't really talked about, who has become a great friend and somebody whose company I enjoy very much, is Stuart Robertson. He had
Yes.
he also was one of those left-handers who looked like
Oh,
he had
yeah.
all the time in the world.
Absolutely. You know, Barry Richards talks about that. You know, remember Glenn Byram telling me that, you know, Barry once said to him, you know, he wished he could play with soft hands as well as Stewie could play. Stewie was an outstanding cricketer, absolutely outstanding. His only problem is it didn't really bother him whether he got to the top or played for South Africa or anything. He had no, you know, I can't say he didn't have ambition, but, you know, to others, it was the most important thing in your life. You know, Stewie got out there, he enjoyed the game. He was an outstanding player. I mean, he great hands. He was a great slip fielder. And then when we needed a wicket keeper, he was there who stepped in as wicket keeper. A great sense of humour, great team man. But you know, he was right up there. You know, of all the local products that we produced, say post Bland, you know, Stewie, Davo, those guys are really, really outstanding cricketers. Jack Heron's another one. You know, so
And then from Manicaland, we all pinned our hopes on Ed Huff. And then
yes.
Ed,
Well,
Ed didn't take it too seriously, I don't think. But
no, he doesn't. I speak to Ed occasionally. He's in Brisbane. He lives in Brisbane. But he was my roomie, you know, when we went to England in 1982, which was the the funniest time of my life with the guy. You know, he was absolutely, but a huge talent, huge talent. Could bowl. He was tall and was very highly rated by Transvaal at one stage. You know, Ali Bacher really rated him. And Ed was a cavalier. Ed was there to have fun. And you know, I could tell you a lot more stories. Don't want to take up your time, but he was very funny, most humorous, big practical joker. Um, you know, a funny guy, really, really funny guy, good guy.
there's a great story. I think it probably got twisted a bit with time, but when he went down on the fast bowlers course
Yes,
to South Africa, he didn't behave very well there. I think the South Africans were quite pleased to see the back of him.
that's right. Yeah, apparently he didn't. The story I hear is that he didn't really get to do too much fast bowling. Um, and But it was a pity because he had huge talent. He had huge talent. But he was a practical joker par excellence. Um, you know, so I shared a room with him and in London, in England, and I hadn't seen my cousin who's living in London for about 15 years, and she called the room one day when I wasn't there. I'd gone for a run, and Ed answered the phone, and she said, "Look, her name's Maria," and she said, "Look, haven't seen John for a long time." And Ed said, "Well, when was the last time you saw him?" And she said, "Oh, Jesus, about 15 years ago." And he said, "Well, you know, he's changed." And then he tells her a story that I've got major drug problems, and I've got to keep injecting. And he spins the story. He said, look, he's okay, but you just got to watch him. So she took me out for lunch a couple of days later, and I got the queerest looks out. They kept looking at my arms, looking for injection holes, all sorts of things. And that was the sort of guy.
Ed, Ed, no, and then after him came Dave Timms, also from Manica and from Rasapi, and he also had a lot of ability, but he also didn't take it very seriously.
Sorry, who's that? Sorry, I didn't miss that.
Dave Timms, who's actually
Oh
related
yeah,
to
yeah,
him.
Dave Timms as well. I mean, Dave was, I mean, he was there. I think part of the problem, being stuck out on a farm and being away from things, he probably missed a bit there, but he was equally talented. I mean, he was
Yeah, yeah. And then
a
just
very
before we
big
go,
background.
Kevin Curran,
Yeah.
John, Kevin did take it very seriously, and
Oh
uh,
yeah.
and a magnificent cricketer, and it runs in the family.
Yeah, I mean, those boys of his are outstanding. We speak with his wife fairly often. Sarah is a lovely girl, but Kevin came to Sports Club when I was playing there with Andy Pycroft and the boys, and I can't remember whether I was captain, but he bowled leg spin, and he was there just bowling leg spin and batting. And then one day we were on the field and somebody got hurt, and we needed somebody to take the new ball. And he said, I'll do it. So he took the new ball and just started bowling. Natural away swimmers. Natural. And then he worked hard at his game. He worked very hard. He used to go down to the nets on his own, with a whole lot of balls, a concrete wicket at Sports Club. I don't even remember it, on the side. And he used to just bowl and bowl and bowl and bowl. And he developed his action really beautifully. And he was also very strong, very fit. And he was determined. He was really, really determined. And so when 1985, a young Australian team came to Zimbabwe to play, Dean Jones was playing in that side, and I can't think a couple of the other guys. I think Steve Waugh might have been, and Dean Jones said, Curran was as quick as most of the West Indies bowlers he had faced. So he was an incredible talent, very, very, very determined, and always wanted to win.
He did he
Casey,
did well in he did well in England too, didn't he? He played.
very well. He did very well. I mean, did very well in the county circuit. He I think he was trying to play for England, but obviously they wouldn't pick him because of where he came from, I think. But he did very well there. I mean, I toured with him to Sri Lanka, and tours to the UK, and he play. He's a confident guy. We beat Pakistan in 1980 in 1983 in the World Cup. The game before the World Cup, we played a friendly against Pakistan. We bowled them out for 240, but we batted really well. All our batters got runs, Jack Heron, Andy Pycroft, everybody. And Kevin was batting number 7. We were 5 wickets down. We had 4 or 5 overs to go, and we needed 6 runs to win. And so Duncan Fletcher said to Kevin, he said, Casey, just get him in singles. Okay. So third ball, Curran hits a 6, and we won the game. That was
John,
the
before
measure of their
just
confidence.
just tell us about that breakthrough. I think it was '83. Zimbabwe cricket now the World Cup.
Yeah.
Which I think Zimbabwe beat Australia.
That's right. We beat them at Trent Bridge. Duncan was captain. We obviously, we had a reasonable run in games before then, and we had that win against Pakistan just before. But the guys fielded very well. That was the most amazing thing. I mean, we made about 240, I think it was. Duncan got 70 odd. He smacked it around. And then our lower middle order with people like Kevin Curran, Ian Butchart, all contributed with 30s and 40s. So we ended up with about 240. Probably not enough to win a game against a side like Australia, but we bowled and fielded magnificently. Now, the fielding was outstanding. And I mean, Jack Heron ran out Kepler Wessels, a direct hit. Andy Pycroft picked up some great catches on the boundary. And they had a good lineup. Kim Hughes was the captain. And so we kept it really, really tight. And eventually we won by 13 runs, I think it was. So it was a tremendous team effort.
Was
Uh,
Peter Rawson bowling then? Was
yeah, Peter bowled the last over. Yeah, he bowled the last over at what's his name, Marsh, the wicketkeeper. Um, I think Marsh needed to get 14 or 15 to win the game off the last over. They ended up only got, I think we won by 13 runs or something like that.
and then
Um,
and then lost to India, if I remember correctly.
yeah, well, India was a it was there was an incredible game that, because wicket was helpful. It was seaming around, a little bit soft. India probably a little bit arrogant, I thought, overconfident. They went into bat. Most guys would have bowled first. They went into bat. They were 17 for 5. And Rawson had picked up 3, Curran had picked up 2. We probably made a mistake there because we should have kept one of them bowling right through. And in fact, Kapil Dev says that in his book. So Kapil Dev came in at number 6 when they were 4 for nothing, and he smashed 175 not out. And it gave one chance when he was over 100. He was dropped at wide long off on a diving catch. But he hit the ball so smoothly and so, I mean, it was just unreal. Hit through the ball. It was undoubtedly one of the best one-day innings of all time. And then at the end of the day, we lost by 30 odd runs. Dave Houghton made a great 80. So it was, we were there. We were competitive.
John, last story. Were you playing in the famous chicken farmer one-day game against Mike Atherton when Edo Brandis got busy?
Got a hat trick?
Yeah, that game.
Watch that game.
knocked the wind out of the England sails. I mean, I think they were also quite cocky. David Lloyd was the coach, and they were almost quite contemptuous of the Zimbabwean team, and they got a bit of a fright.
It was in Zimbabwe, wasn't it? It was in Zimbabwe. Yeah, it was. I think I remember correctly, that was in about the mid 1990s.
Yeah.
I packed up then. Edo took a hat trick, I think it was, in one of those games. What I remember of Edo was when he bowled out England in the 1992 World Cup. I'll finish with that story, probably, if you've got to go. But he picked up 4 for 19. We had made about 140 on a wicket which was a little bit uneven. And Edo, the night before, Edo, myself, Graham Hick, Kevin Arnott, Ali Shah had dinner together. And Graham Hick was playing for England. And we had dinner, and then we finished up, and Edo said to Hickey, he said, "Good luck tomorrow, Hickey, but I think I've got your wicket for zip." And sure enough, he bowled Graham Hick for naught.
Wow.
Edo picked up 4, got the top 4, Gooch, Smith, Lamb, and Hick.
Wow, what a story.
Won that game.
I missed some of that. Those were my hunting days. I kind of lost touch with what was going on, so picked up stories much later. But John, I know you've got to go, so can't thank you enough. It's been absolutely fascinating, and maybe we can do another one.
I mean, I should write a book at some stage, but anyway, we'll
yeah, cheapers, these stories, and cricket, people love cricket stories, about what goes on off the field and on the field, I suppose. There's so much.
Yeah, no, it is. There's a lot, and I've been lucky to have played that long. But certainly, if you want to follow up, we can follow up some other time once
John, just the record you set was the longest interval between playing test matches, isn't it? What was that time? That time period?
Yeah, it's probably be a title to a book I write. 22 years and 222 days between my last test for South Africa and my first test for Zimbabwe. So that would have been March 1970 through to October 1992. Okay, so 22 years, 222 days. There you are.
What a hell of a story, John. But thank you for your time, and thanks for all you did for cricket in the homeland.
Sorry about the teams, and let's keep in touch, Hannes. It's always good to chat to you, and enjoy Zambia.
Thanks, John.
Right.
Cheers,
God bless.
Bye.